Go live now. All right.
There we
So
go.
we are, of course, this is Dr. Keith McNally. This is Conversations with Mitch Gray. This is a weekly, or as often as we can do it, conversations around men's mental health. And so, Mitch, I always appreciate you joining us. I am yet to say we are live because I'm waiting for Zoom and the YouTube applications to kind of connect and give me a picture of you're on. But Zoom does say that we are streaming live. It's just that I'd like the confirmation. And so, how are things going, Mitch? As we do some small talk.
Good. I think we're live, Keith. I think we're good.
Okay,
Yeah, things are going pretty good for me. How about you?
so yesterday, I did a 21-mile hike, and so people, even on the trail where I go, because I'm full gear, so this kind of put this in context. Since my heart attack back in 2022, so almost like a week out, it'll be 2 years, that I had made the decision to redesign a lot of my life, and so a year prior, my fifth suicide attempt, and that kind of restructured how I interact with people and myself a bit differently. But the heart attack was a different wake-up call. It was, I, we're both athletes. We don't get paid for it, but we're both athletes in a sense because we like to be outside and we like to be active. And for me, it's endurance stuff. And so I had always dreamed about being a marathon runner. I like to jog, I like to run, but my legs and my feet and my lungs had different stories to tell because that was not working for me. At least not the running capacity. So I became a walker. I became somebody who just went outside and walked. But after the heart attack, I had redesigned my life because what I was doing up until then, I was strength training. So I was eating a lot of protein. We had probably had multiple conversations around this, but I had to redesign everything because what I was literally doing was killing me. And no
Yeah.
pun intended. The heart attack showed it. But it wasn't just the heart, it was the kidneys, and it was a lot of other things internally that we don't necessarily see directly unless we have some internal vision that suggests that Keith, you really need to do things differently. And what I was doing was more out of, I don't know, maybe ego. But now I'm
Mm.
doing things that are aligned with who I am naturally. So I I always could do this because my arms are so small. I'm thinner, so when I had the heart attack, I was 160 pounds. I was size, and so in context, I'm 5'5". I'm shrinking, but I'm 5'5" at 55 years old. I now weigh 137. I am the healthiest I've ever been. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago. The cardiologist gave me a win. He said, "You are healthy." And
Yeah.
because I don't take medications, he almost said, "I don't want to see you anymore." But we had one more visit
Mm.
because I was going to go hike the Appalachian Trail. But because of Hurricane Helene destroying that entire the southern part of the Appalachian Trail from Georgia to at least Damascus, Virginia. So the starting point if you're going north. I've postponed my through hike at least until 2026 or whenever the Appalachian Trail Conservancy says it's a go. So right now they're asking people not to kind of interfere with they're still
Be in that area.
without
Yeah.
water. Yeah, they have to clean it
Yeah.
up and literally rebuild even
Yeah.
the infrastructure. The roads have been washed away, homes, businesses, and so it's a really sad
Yeah.
situation for those people in the high country.
Yeah.
But I said all that to say is that yesterday Sunday Sunday's my long day, so it's a 20 plus. I always add the plus because it's always over 20 miles. It's my sacred space. And so whether I'm up on the mountains or hiking at the beach, it's my sacred space. That has become in alignment with who I am mentally, physically, spiritually. My soul, my spirit, everything that I am aligns with me being outdoors. Now, yesterday I had a scare, and so I might bring that I might bring that part of the story in later on. Not a physical, well, not internal. I had walked up on the snake. It was camouflaged in the bush, and
Yes.
it didn't
I
care
love
for me. It
snakes.
didn't care for me too much at all
Yeah.
because it hissed. I mean, I Scream. Then my daughter says, "Did you scream like a girl like you usually did?" I said, "Absolutely," because that was, I don't know if it tried to strike at me. It would have easily, because it was the bank goes up like that where the
Yeah,
trail is. So it
right,
could have easily had, bit into my arm, this my right arm,
right.
making it from elbow to hand. I I screamed, jumped out of the way, and I went one way,
Went on your way.
and the snake went the other. The snake literally went the other way. It didn't actually try to chase me. So
Yeah.
I'm blessed. My guardian angels are at work. But I say all that to say I'm in my sacred space when I'm out there. And I thought that would be a really good conversation to have. You and I, and for men in particular, to really define and design what is sacred to them. How does
Mhm.
that work?
Let me start with you. What does it mean to have a sacred space? You said that that's become your sacred space. So that's my first thought is, what does that even mean? For someone listening who's like, what the, like, I don't even use the word sacred. What does that mean to have a sacred space?
Well, a lot of my life has been redesigned, not just in terms of what I eat and how I exercise, but encompassing a lot of different practices. And so we've had conversations now since 2021, 2022, for several years now. And since our conversations and other conversations, I have learned to move towards a more spiritual. I don't want to get cliche and I don't want to, freak people out. A spiritual awakening, I guess, is what you would call it. And so I'm really learning some of the methodologies and the processes and the theories, not necessarily Buddhist or other things like that. I grew up Catholic and converted to Christianity, and I do align with the teachings of Jesus Christ. So the teachings, not necessarily the church, but his
Yeah.
ideology of, you know, love, peace, compassion, healing, and really designing a life structure that gives you peace personally. And then I think once that's done personally, you could extend that to everything else that's around you. So
Mhm.
for me, that sacred space allows me time to get away from distractions. Now, 21-mile hike is a 7 hour day, almost an 8 hour day. So it's literally like a work day, but I spend it all by myself in nature. Every once in a while, I see somebody and say hi. And I hike to the ocean and I literally spend about 30 minutes. I'll eat to replenish, the calories, at the very least, because I got 10 miles to go back. But the ocean is one of the places, and there's other places that I like to kind of go and sit and just kind of close my eyes, breathe. You taught me to breathe
Mhm.
and just really appreciate the space that I'm in, being mindful of the present moment, creating an image of, I like to now call it my divinity, just aligning myself with my spiritual essence. So I do, like I said, last week and maybe some previous weeks, we're kind of moving in toward this idea that we are not just thoughts, we're not just a body, but there's a part of us that really we need to grapple with, we need to come to
Yeah.
terms with, and we really need to learn to move into, whether we're man or woman, male or female,
Yeah.
there's this energy out there that's spiritual in nature. Now, there are some people who would say, well, that's your quantum space, whatever that is, the subatomic particles and quantum theory, quantum dynamics. It's the unseen.
Yeah.
The spiritual is the unseen. And so I'm kind of tapping into that more and more and definitely have grown because of it. That's a lot of monologue.
Oh, yeah, that's okay though. So if I'm thinking about what a sacred space is, my next thought is how would someone create that? So how did you find your sacred space? Because I've had a behind the curtain view of all of this development, but most of our listeners haven't. So how would you verbalize how you found your sacred space. Did you stumble upon it? Did it kind of just come to you? What did that kind of look like?
I've, as I've gotten older, I think that there is something about who you are innately that's always pushing you towards, if you could just kind of surrender to who you are, it teaches you where you belong. So I always call that like this innateness about us. And like I said, I was pushing my body to do something that maybe it wasn't designed to do,
Mm-hmm.
strength train, to
Mm-hmm.
to physically look bigger, be bigger, have these big hulking
Mm-hmm.
muscles and whatnot. My body had always rejected that, but my ego always liked it, but my body
Yeah.
rejected it. It was it was discomforting to my gastrointestinal area at
Yeah.
the very
Yeah.
least, but all the other parts of the body, the body, men being men, men want to look physically strong, healthy, but the internal part of me wasn't aligning with
Yeah.
that. I had always liked endurance stuff. So like I said, I always wanted to be an endurance runner. To answer your question directly, it was my body. I think I accepted the fact that this is no longer going to be the way you exercise and, be athletic.
Right.
I just kind of stepped into, well, I can't run anymore. So just walking. But then something about the inside of me was just calling to just be out in nature.
Yeah.
And I surrendered to it. So a part of
Mm-hmm.
it was just kind of falling into it. But at the same time, I'm thinking your body, something about who you are, the unseen part of you, really pushes you into that space that you belong.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't know it until we know it.
Yeah.
That may not
Yeah.
make sense, but we don't know it until it becomes so in part of us.
Yeah.
It became so a part of me that I don't I want to be in that space. I want to
Mm-hmm.
be up in the mountains. I want to be outdoors. I want to, th- there is something mystical, magical, just wonderful about the smell of the
Yeah.
ocean air
Yeah.
and hearing the crash of the waves. There's
Mm-hmm.
something just wonderful about even 30 minutes. Now, getting back is a different story because I've got to do 7 miles of my 21-mile hike. 7 miles is in sand. And so with boots and a pack,
Yeah.
it's not the easiest hike, but that 30 minutes I give myself, maybe 40 minutes on the ocean, on the sand, watching and then I'm looking out over the Atlantic. And so this is the North Carolina, Virginia border. I'm looking out over the Atlantic. There is just ocean upon ocean. I can't
Yeah.
see way out there. It's just ocean, left, right, and to the front. And so it's just an amazing view. And then, experiencing the salt air is just, not only does it clear the sinuses, but I think it clears a lot of other things too. And so it's just a great place to be.
So for those of us that can't go to the ocean, what what thoughts if someone's just being introduced to this idea of sacred spaces and you've painted a really cool picture of what your sacred space looks like about being outdoors and being in nature and taking time to really connect with the rest of the universe, the rest of the energy that so often we don't take time to connect with. But for someone who's just kind of going, okay, sacred space, whatever, I can see that it's lighting Keith up, but I don't really get it, but I'm willing to start. How would you advise someone to introduce them to what a sacred space could look like on an everyday level? What would that make? Because for you, I know you do most of your hiking on the weekends because you have a job. So you do most of your hiking on the weekends. You do this real connected hiking on your Sunday hike. But what could someone do incrementally, like every day, to kind of just begin creating that sacred space for them?
So to clarify, do you hike every day, or is every day that my legs give me the ability to do that? So Monday through Friday,
But you
but
do
the
this real, yeah, is
yeah,
on Sundays.
that Sunday is all in. And so I tend to think that if I could do it, and if the people around me would give me time, I could probably do a 30-mile hike in a day. And so I've not
Yeah.
pushed that, but at some point I'm probably going to do it. But I know people who are, again, we talk about professional versus amateur, whatever that space is, but who play instruments or sing, and so just naturally gifted or have really learned to be in that space, whether it's drums or guitar or whatever that musical talent is. When they're in that space, that really becomes uh, so everything. Their flow is what I've learned to people have called it. Their flow or
Yeah.
their energy. They are so in tune with who they are because they're allowing that whatever that energy, that creativity, that release in their music.
Yeah.
I know people who love art. So whether you do collages or you paint, my daughter used to paint, and that used to be a really good space for her. She has stopped that. I'm kind of disappointed. We still keep the paint set and the easel and everything, but that used to be a space where she could focus,
Right.
push aside the distractions of life. Or for her right now at school and as a budding teenager, it's dating.
Yep.
And so,
Yep.
um, whatever that innately is, the more you give yourself permission to kind of dive in and just kind of build on it and be in that space, push out the distractions, and then find yourself in a creative space, then you start incorporating different things, then
Yeah.
you kind of start being intentional about it. How do I breathe to kind of, because then we have to get into at some point the spirituality of what it
Hmm.
really means to breathe. And so
Hmm.
it'll touch on the mystical or the magical or whatever word we want to use,
Sure.
the breath of life, and that's going
Yeah.
back to Catholic and Christian, maybe some other religious doctrine. um, Mindfulness and meditation. And so being able to think about the space that you're in and really hone in on maybe an image or a color or um, something you want to do. And for me, that was hiking the Appalachian Trail. So I actually, in my mind, put myself on the trail.
Yeah.
Have never been on the trail, but I've been out in nature, so I know what it could look like. I've watched YouTube videos on what it does look like.
Yeah.
So I have some mental imagery about what the whole Appalachian Trail would look like. And so I would put myself out there. It's then creating this space. Maybe it's just imagery at this point, but that imagery, that space becomes you. And so you're
Mhm.
able to redesign a life for yourself because you're putting yourself in a space that's happy,
Mhm.
joyful, peaceful, you're full of contentment, and you are elevating yourself
Yeah.
in a space that's really, really feels good. At the
Yeah.
very
Good.
least, it feels good, but then it
Yeah.
actually does good things for your body. It does good things for your brain. Does good things for your mind, your thoughts, your emotions.
Right.
It kind of like this recreative, rebirthing loop. The more you put yourself in that space, the more that space gives back to you in a positive way,
Mm.
the more you want to get into that space. And so when
Mm.
you're having to step out of that space to go to work or, you know, to raise your daughter, to drive a car, all these other things that we have to do. Go grocery shopping. I know for you, grocery shopping is meditative. Uh,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
for many of us, it's kind of a
It's
necessity, but
frustrating. Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
frustrating. And given, the prices of things and all that kind of craziness that's going on in our current world,
Mhm.
it could kind of help us. We can't do anything with the prices. Maybe we should. Maybe we could if we, as a mass people, but that's another conversation. But it gives us a space to say, all right, let me pay $5 for this gallon of milk and be okay
Yeah.
with it.
Yeah.
But at the
Yeah.
very least, you're not overly stressed about it because you're now internally, you're at peace with who you are.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about banking, about deposits and withdrawals, and that's really what you're saying is that the more we can spend time in our sacred space, the more we're depositing that goodness into our emotional bank. So when those moments of withdrawal happen, we have something to withdraw from rather
Absolutely.
than just a bank of emptiness. So
Yeah.
I like it, Keith. Thanks for sharing.
Well, don't drop me like that. That was rude. That was bad.
Why? Thanks
Well,
for
because
sharing, man. It's good.
so for those people who are watching, listening, I know the men out there, our conversations are really focused on men, and this may be a really challenging conversation or even a thought to have. So I don't want to leave it at just me because we really want to motivate and inspire men out there to feel comfortable with the conversations that we're having. So I need to ask you a question and then we'll close out the conversation.
Okay.
How can men take that first step in feeling comfortable? One, with the word sacred, and two, designing a space where they can push aside the distractions. And I'm not talking about watching, spending all day in front of the TV watching football or whatever your favorite
Mhm.
sport is. I'm not talking about that. I literally want to, if there is a way to kind of say, for one day out of the week, no phone, no TV, no internet, no
Yeah.
technology, redesign, get back into maybe if it's our primitive self. I think we're disconnected with our primitive self, if that's the right word to use. Getting back in touch with who we are as a person. How do we design? How do we take that first step and
So
get
I
to
would
that?
back up even further
Okay.
and say take 5 minutes a day, just 5 minutes. Because if we're not sometimes your story is one of those stories where you had a shock take place in your life that made major adjustments welcomed.
Mm-hmm.
Most people don't have that experience. Most people are just going through the mundane of life. And now we're introducing them to the word sacred, which most people don't use. I also like the word holy, which most people don't use. So I tend to use those words interchangeably. You could change those out for special or for focused. So you could change them out maybe for more relatable words. But we like the word sacred, so that's what you and I use. So we're introducing people to a new concept, but we're also introducing them to a new way of living. And so to say, hey, how can you take a full day? I don't think most people are ready. They don't have the threshold for that. So I
Well,
think
maybe
it's
not the 8 hour day, but maybe an hour.
no. I think that's a lot. I just remember
Okay.
back when I first started meditating, 5 minutes was a really, really long time. A really, really long time. And I was a guy that came from people that gave 30-minute prayers. But 5 minutes of meditation, when I first got introduced to it, was a really long time. And so I just know, and I look back to, you and I both, I still do strength training. You used to do strength training. It's the same as I can't go into the gym and bench press 225 pounds when I first start. I have to first bench press maybe 10 pounds, maybe 20 pounds, maybe 100, maybe if I'm really naturally strong maybe I can. So it does take increments, and people are going to move at their own pace. And so to make it really invitational, how can you just take 5 minutes a day, set it aside, and do what feels good to you? As an example, I have a hacky sack. For those watching on video, I love playing hacky sack. Maybe it's 5 minutes of playing hacky sack. Maybe it's 5 minutes of juggling. Maybe it's 5 minutes of reading. Maybe it's 5 minutes of just sitting and doing nothing. I love what you said earlier about it made you feel good. And so I think that's the invitation is to do something that makes you feel really good and that benefits you. And if you can start on 5 minutes a day and protect that space, maybe in a month you can move it to 10 minutes a day. Maybe your goal in 3 months is to take a 4 hour day on a Saturday or Sunday and just spend time in nature or whatever that looks like for you. But I think the real invitation is what makes you feel good. You kind of joked about shopping. Shopping is one of those things for me. I know this is kind of an abnormal thing for guys, especially. I love to shop.
Well, if we were
I
looking
always
for
have.
Lego, if we were shopping for
Legos would
Legos,
be different for you. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
I'd
just
be,
love shopping of all kinds. I love to shop. I have since I was a kid. I love going into stores. That's almost a sacred thing for me. And I don't even have to spend money. I just enjoy like your things of the ocean, which I've been to the ocean and have the same reaction you do. But I kind of get that when I go into a store and look at clothes and like I just have that. So that's a sacred space for me. So I think the invitation is just to find out what feels good to you, which leads me to the second thing is you've got to experiment with it. You really have to experiment with it and figure out, you and I are churchgoers. But for some people, going to church is their sacred space, taking part in a religious ceremony, like we talked about last week. That's a real sacred space. So I think really just finding what feels good to you and experimenting and just taking it incrementally. 5 minutes a day right now, just do that and then move forward as you just like when you started hiking, you didn't start off doing 21-mile hikes. You had to work your way to it. And so give yourself permission to really just try and to fail and try meditation if you've never done it before. Try a breathing exercise, try learning a new hobby, try going hiking or getting outside and at least walking around your neighborhood, whatever that looks like. So be really curious. I think that's the biggest invitation when we're talking about sacred spaces is it's going to look different for everyone. So be really, really curious about what that looks like for you. And then the last thing I would invite people to do is to really protect those sacred spaces because it's really easy. And I know you've experienced this. There are the moments that you have to talk yourself into going on the hike because maybe we don't feel the best. Maybe we don't feel like doing it. And so there are those moments that, or other people try and invade our sacred space. So really protecting those is super, super important. And maybe we'll talk more in the future about sacred spaces because this is a cool subject to dive into.
I appreciate it. And we should, and we will,
Yeah.
absolutely. So for those of you who have been watching and listening, I thank you for joining us. Mitch, as always, the conversation is awesome. I love the energy. We'll see y'all next time. Take care.